the speaker, of being the head of the Committee of Education in the House of Representatives, and in that role, to come and join us tonight. I asked him to speak with us, be able to address the Common Core, and to also to spend a little bit of time kind of bring us up to speed on some 2013 legislation that he felt like we'd be knowledgeable, need to know about, and maybe some 2014, just briefly some things he'd think about for 2014. But as you would expect as a Freedom Group, Representative Behning, I think most of us here would say that we're strongly believe that Common Core should not be part of Indiana's education plan. And so that as we finish up tonight with your speaking, then we'll probably have a question in regards to that.
Obviously, Connie does a great job. Stacy did a great job representing the county for many years, and was a great leader. Also, I'd be happy to talk to you in regards to being a precinct committeeman. I'm a precinct committeeman in Marion County, and the role, it really depends on, I assume you're a Republican, and it really depends on the county chairman and what role they want you to play. But I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. Let's get around this change time. This session, obviously, especially if you were very interested in Common Core, became a session that was very contentious in terms of that issue. There were two bills filed. There was a bill filed in the House dealing with Common Core, and there was a bill filed in the Senate dealing with Common Core. They both were identical. The one in the Senate moved, and it moved out of committee. It came over. They had about a 6-hour hearing, I believe it was, something like that, on the Common Core. Then it came over to the House. I chaired the House committee, and actually the Speaker had an opportunity to talk to me before session, and the Speaker was not an advocate of moving the Common Core agenda. Moving a pause or a stop to the Common Core at the point in time when it was introduced. In fact, he had asked me before session if I were inclined to hear it. If I was, he wouldn't send it to my committee, he'd send it to rules. The Speaker has the ability to control the flow of the legislation throughout session. He has the ability to sign any bill to committee, so if he doesn't believe he wants the bill to move, he usually signs it to a rules committee. And what happens to bills to the rules committee is they go there to die, basically. So he indicated to me early on that he did not want me to move Common Core language that was in the Senate. The Senate had several versions over the period of time. One was a version that would have stopped Common Core, or paused, I think it would stop Common Core for the time. It would have allowed the superintendent of public instruction to go to each one of the congressional districts and have hearings in each one of those districts with the public to determine whether or not to move forward. After that point in time, the decision could be made whether or not to move forward with Common Core, or whether to move forward with a different curriculum or standard. Common Core is a standard, and I know there's differences of opinions from all sorts of people. Believe me, it's a very contentious issue. It was originally started by Achieve. Achieve is the National Governors Association. It's a group focused on trying to move education standards in our country. If you look at where our students perform in the United States and compare it just on a national assessment test, TIMSS is one that's an international benchmark. Students in the United States continually fall behind our industrialized nations. We usually are ranked anywhere from 15th to 16th in terms of comparison with our international competitors. So we also spend more money than most of the industrialized nations do on educating our children. So it's one of those things. It's like, why are our kids falling so far behind, and why don't we have this meeting the needs of students? So Achieve came together, and as they were looking at, they said, with the very mobile society we have, it makes sense for us to create a standards that is somewhat universal. And Common Core is language arts, which is your English standards, and math only. It doesn't go any further than that. Those two standards were the two that they start with. Now, they actually have a science standard that they've recently introduced, which is not part of any type of endorsement by any state at this point in time that I'm aware of. But so those standards were brought by Achieve, and they also then, obviously we have our state superintendents, and there's a national group of state superintendents, and they've both those groups came together and said, let's concurrently work together to create a common core that we can have across the country, which in philosophy and idea is probably not, in fallacy, not a problem. What happened along the way, I believe, it really caused the biggest problem, and I don't think there would even be much debate over this, was that Obama was elected president in 2008. And then Obamacare became the law of the land. You know, he had a majority in both of the houses, was able to do pretty much what he wants to do, as he does today with his executive orders. And the Department of Education then decided that they, under the stimulus money that was available, they wanted to do a program called Race to the Top. Race to the Top was a program created by the Department of Education to encourage states to be creative, to develop ideas and agendas that will move student performance. They could be any number of things. Indiana, we did apply. All right, we had an initial application of Race to the Top. It was thought that Indiana was likely to be a recipient of Race to the Top. One of the caveats to Race to the Top was that you had to be a Common Core state, or you had to have college and career readiness standards. And college and career readiness standards is what they actually, I don't know if they say Common Core or college and career readiness, because right now there's more focus on college and career readiness than there is Common Core, and the two of them have kind of collided together. We had already adopted Common Core. Common Core had been brought to what happens when standards are brought, it's frequently standards are updated to Indiana. We have standards constantly, since you have standards for all your different curriculum, you have math, science, social studies, all those different curriculums are updated periodically. They go through like a 7-year cycle where there's adoption. Common Core was adopted with a significant amount of study. It was brought to the roundtable, which has the responsibility of endorsing them, and it was brought to the state board. The state board is a body that's appointed by the governor, and the governor, they actually have the authority to establish standards. In the history of the state of Indiana, the General Assembly has never been involved in setting standards for education, and probably shouldn't be. When you have 150 legislators, most of which are not significantly focused on education, it would be better for us not to be setting standards, to have people who spend their time and have the experts with them setting the standards for the state. Now, there's a difference between standards. You have standards which are basically what are set for us to have our students are to attain a certain level of parity across this state or country. And then you've got curriculum. Curriculum drives standards. So the curriculum is created after the standards are created. You have standards here that says we have to have standards, for instance, if you wanted to know that 2 + 2 = 4, for instance, that would be a standard, math standard that might be created. And then curriculum is developed that would be available to schools that would, and educators that would put together how we get to students can figure out 2 + 2 = 4. One of the purposes of Common Core was to, which is common with the college and career readiness standards, is that U.S. children tend to have been, as at least I was, educated in a period of time where rote learning was very important. When I was a kid, I was educated in terms of my, I'm sure all of you probably were as well, your multiplication numbers. 7 times 7 is 49, 7 times 6 is 42. You had all those things memorized. And then you go into algebra and some of those other mathematics studies where you start using some of those things. And unfortunately, kids today don't know how to take what they've learned and be able to use it and develop strategic thinking. So what the purpose of the Common Core and college and career readiness standards are to create standards that not just have certain quality of education standards, but also create learning that is more embedded and more defined in deeper learning skills in terms of focusing on education. Anyway, so that's kind of where Common Core is. And then, so states adopted it, the state, the Department, State Board and Department of Education were both on board. you know, Tony Bennett was defeated, and Glenda was kind of on the bubble, or I don't know. She sometimes says she is Superintendent Ritz's opponent, but she tells me she's not opposed to Common Core. She believes Common Core for the language arts standards are correct. She wants to evaluate the math standards. She thinks that maybe those need to have a little bit more thorough vetting. We had early in 2013, the state board again unanimously endorsed Common Core. So the state board, which is a body that endorses or creates standards, generally endorses Common Core. What happened during session is the bill moved out of the Senate, which put a stop to it. I did not move the bill as it was. I spoke to the speaker. The speaker was not in favor of moving that bill the way it was. What ended up happening as final negotiations come about, there was language put in 1427, which was a House bill, which had a multitude of updates of really unimportant updates to the Department of Education. It eliminated different things and basically outdated code sites. And language was put in there that was basically the same Common Core language that the Senate had passed before, almost exactly, and it moved over to the House, and it was then assigned to, that was the author of that bill was Representative Rhodes, and she wanted to consent, which is what I think many of you probably called in and said, you know, to the speaker, especially the speaker's office, we want her to consent on that bill, which would have stopped Common Core and just basically kind of almost walked away. The speaker was not interested in doing that. It was had asked Representative Rhodes to look at a different direction and try to figure out, wanted her to at least be willing to look at some different language, because he was not at all interested in taking that direction. So he had asked me to go to work with the governor's office and put together some language that would be compromise language that we could put together in 1427. We had a meeting with both the House and Senate. So Senate members, Senator Snyder, Senator Long, Senator Cruz, myself, Representative Bosma, Representative Houston, and Representative Rhodes were all in a meeting together, and the language then was provided to them, which really what I ended up doing is taking much of the language that the Senate had in place on Common Core, and basically used exactly what they said, but we changed it a little bit, adding some different caveats. They wanted the state, well, basically Superintendent Ritz to go at one point to all the congressional districts. It was the opinion of both the leader of the House, Speaker Bosma, and David Long, that the meetings did not need to be across the state, that they could be in Indianapolis. So what we did is we put a pause on Common Core, that Common Core is not allowed to be in the state board. The way that the law reads is the state board cannot force any further implementation of Common Core. 2 years ago, when they put together the Common Core standards, they also put an implementation schedule in. An implementation schedule has been moving forward, and the language does not say that schools have to stop implementation. It says that the state board cannot ask schools to do anything further with it. And we also say that the I-STEP assessment has to be used for the next 2 years. What was going to happen in the with the adoption of Common Core, Superintendent Bennett had still been in office, and technically, I don't know what Superintendent Ritz intends to do, but there's a new assessment tool that's coming out. One is called PARC, which is the consortium that Indiana was involved in. We were a governing party on it. And the other one's called Smarter Balance. And there are two different assessments. They look at a different way. They're both online. They are, the one difference is that Smarter Balance is an adaptive test, meaning that you come to it, and if your skill set is, it constantly continues to move the skill level based on where you are. It's not a test, for instance, that you would take, it always is increasing rigor. And PARC is a traditional test, much like ISTEP, only it has the ability to have the higher level thinking embedded in. So there's more questions on PARC that would ask students to take what they know, have learned at school, and basically asking them a question or a survey and taking what they heard on this or have read on this question and with that develop an answer. But neither one of those assessments were on track to have start the assessment in the year 2014-15. So next year would be, the first year PARC would be online, and it's still basically anticipated that PARC will go online next year. But in Indiana, we'll use ISTEP, we'll not be using PARC at least for the next 2 years. The other part of 1427 requires that the superintendent of public instruction is to have a report of Common Core to the State Board of Education by July 1st. I'm told that may not happen, or it may just be a report. But as it is right now, there was a meeting State Board today, and the superintendent of public instruction has canceled the July meeting, so I don't know how she's going to give the report to the State Board if they don't have a meeting. So we're not quite sure how that's going to happen. After that, the legislature is to have hearings beginning in anytime after July 1st, which will study the Common Core from now until we have to be done at least by November 1st. And I think September 1st, I believe, is a deadline where the Office of Management Budget, we also asked them to do a study in terms of cost to let us know, the legislature know, what the cost of implementation is and what the cost of fully implementing it, as well as the cost of not implementing it. Because there is an incurrent cost when you think of curriculum, think of standards, and you think of curriculum, standards drive curriculum. So you have your standards here, and then, like I said, the curriculum is created. There's 46 states today that have adopted Common Core. If you are a state that does not have Common Core and the rest of the country does, what's going to happen is you're going to have the publishers of textbooks are going to obviously create Common Core textbooks, and to get textbooks that don't meet those standards is going to be either significantly more expensive, because you're going to end up creating an industry where, rather than meet the needs of all the students throughout the country, it's going to be meeting the needs of a million children in the state of Indiana. So they're going to have to study and let us know what the costs are of those things. We are to report back to the state board no later than November 1st as to what the OMB study is to show, as well as legislative study. So both of us will be meeting succinctly. We'll be able to be meeting. Senator Cruz and I are co-chairs of the committee on Commission on Common Core, and we have not established any meetings yet for that. We're co-chairs on two other commissions, the Commission on Education and the Commission on Regional Campuses, and we have set a couple more commission meetings for the standard commission, but not Common Core. So we will have those meetings. They will be in Indianapolis. They will be, I'm sure, covered by the media, at least the first one, in terms of interest, and they will be available to the public to participate and share your thoughts and share what you think, what you believe Common Core is, or what Common Core should be, or what we shouldn't be doing, either with Common Core or with standards. We will have a number of meetings, and then we have to have a report by November 1st. We have given the state board the authority now. We made sure that after that this state board couldn't do anything on Common Core. The state board that's in place today could not do anything on Common Core until after November 1st. July 1 of this year, Governor Pence will be making new appointments to the Common Core, to the state board. He's already made his appointments, and one of the commitments he had made to advocates slowing down or stopping Common Core was that he would have at least one person that would be either neutral on Common Core or opposed to it. And that one person is obviously Andrea Neal, if anybody has followed what's going on in the state board. So she is the appointment that definitely would meet that standard. He believes that she might, even though she's an an opponent today, that if the facts are there, that she might be someone who would be able to be moved to change her position. So he believes she could be a valuable tool long term. So anyway, the state board will have.
I didn't understand that. You're saying the governor is saying that Andrea Neal could possibly be persuaded to be
If
in
he
favor?
believes, he believes, I haven't talked to a person, I've talked to him staff, that in terms of, Andrea's one who's been vocally opposed to it. If it is not as bad as everyone says it is, he believes that she's, although she's not open-minded on it right now, but that, you know, she's an intelligent person who has been very interested in education over her life. She's taught at St. Richard's. That she could be persuaded if what he's heard on Common Core and what, you know, compare what the rumors are and what the reality is. And if she's able to see the reality the way some people have seen it, that maybe she would change her mind, and instead of being a huge opponent, could be someone who might be willing to support it in the future.
So you're saying
if the statistics,
she's fair-minded and does a fair evaluation of it, right?
I'm saying that she's not open-minded today. She's opposed to it today, but if the facts are, which I think many people are, the Common Core, I shouldn't say many people, but people who have spent time looking at Common Core believe that Common Core is not the problem that some people think it is, then she may be willing to at least consider that position, and if, since she has been someone who's been very vocal on it, she would be a great spokesperson. If you'll let, you can ask questions and I'll have an answer for you. So anyway, she's the appointment, one appointment that's opposed, and then he's got his six new appointments that he's made. He's returning a couple of people who are currently on the state board. The state board in November will have the authority to adopt standards. They can go back and re-adopt Common Core. They can, in November, they've been given emergency rulemaking authority, which is required. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get the standards adopted in time to get them in place by next year. Because what you're basically are telling educators today is we're kind of putting a stop on any type of forward motion, which is, I think most educators feel somewhat frustrated by. And we're going to look at it for a year, study it, and then we'll come back and make a decision in that. So the state board will then have the authority from on November 1st. They can take the actions and then just report from the General Assembly and from OMB and decide to either adopt some Common Core, to adopt standards similar to Common Core, or do totally different. It's up to them to make that decision. So basically, it's punted to the state board at that point in time to make the decision after November 1st. So that is the language that was adopted by the General Assembly, and that is basically the actions that will happen within the next 4 to 5 months, and then it will be a state board to make their decision. Yes, ma'am.
I would, in deference to your preference to deal with the reality, and you're talking as though many people who are opposed to Common Core are not dealing with reality. I would like to say the reality is that it is against federal statutes for the federal government to direct, control, or supervise curriculum. Now,
Actually, if you look at the federal constitution, the Constitution gives the federal government no jurisdiction over education at all. You know, our federal government over time has created the Department of Education. The only way actually the federal government historically works this in many areas where they have no jurisdiction. They take our money, and what they do is they send the money back with strings attached and say, you know, you want our money, you're going to have to dance our dance and do what we want you to do. There's no question. I know that Obama has tied money race to the top, and I think that was a tragedy. And I think the fact that the Department of Education is even involved in it is a tragedy, because I think what's happened is something that would have really been what most people would have said the right way for a federalist society to come together, where you have the states saying, hey, we ought to, as Connie was saying about the consortium of 22 states that came together and said, let's look at our voter registration plans. It wasn't the federal government that did it, the states came together and did it. That's kind of what happened with Common Core. And what's happened, though, is the feds now have come around and said, hey, we like Common Core too, and we want to endorse Common Core. Now, contrary to what's been said, however, the federal government to this point in time, other than the Race to the Top, and the Race to the Top grant did not require, I'm quite certain, it did not say that it had to be Common Core. It said it has to have college and career ready standards. And that is where Common Core is aligned. Common Core is college and career ready. If you would go to any university in the state of Indiana and ask their leadership staff, they would tell you that Common Core and college and career ready align. Our Commissioner of Education, for instance, Senator Teresa Lovers, would say the same thing, that that's one and the same. They did say that for Race to Top dollars, you would have to do that. But to this point, it is totally voluntary. It's not mandated. The federal government, the difference that some people see is that the federal government is saying you have to do it. You had to do it for Race to Top, had to have college and career ready standards. If you wanted to compete for Race to Top, you didn't have to have Common Core. And same way with our waiver on No Child Left Behind. I'm sure you're probably aware that Tony Bennett received a waiver for No Child Left Behind. Under No Child Left Behind, if we had not received a waiver, I think there's 32 states now that have waivers. It was legislation was passed, if you remember, it was by Senator Kennedy and President Bush worked together to create that. And it actually mandated the states had to have assessments and had to have some penalties and standards built in, not necessarily standards, but had to have an assessment track in every state, and then you had to have an accountability system built in that required different actions be taken. Now, it has what they call AYP, or Adequate Yearly Progress, and every specific subgroup had to make AYP, or these schools started to get sanctioned and have negative grades. And Indiana we had already adopted accountability system. So what happened in Indiana is we layered our Public Law 221, which is already lawful in the state of Indiana, and No Child Left Behind together. And so they were actually linked. And so when that became law, if Indiana had not gotten a waiver by 2014, every school would have been an F. No school, or there have been several like Carmel and Brownsburg, and maybe there's like 5 schools I think that would have maybe been able to have grades higher than that. But most schools would have been F schools according to our grading system because of the fact that they have subgroups that could not meet what was determined by the federal government at the end of the year progress. So part of the waiver again was that you had to have college and career readiness standards. And Tony Bennett said, I've got Common Core, that's college and career ready. So the federal government accepted that. So it wasn't really Common Core that was mandated. But there's no question, I think, long term, the fear from a lot of people is that to get Title I money, for instance, which, I think that some people would say, why are we getting Title I money? I mean, Indiana gets a lot of Title I money, millions and millions of dollars. But it's federal money, obviously, and it's not block granted. It comes to the states, and we have to use it specific ways. But there's been no requirement to have Common Core or anything like that. And there's still Common Core. And that always could happen. It could always be in some other standards. Yes, sir.
I understand the Common Core reaches further than the state or the federal government ever reached in education. For example, Catholic schools, religious schools, private schools, and now even homeschools. Do you not consider that?
Actually, that's not true. Common Core, it
Well,
depends on
the
the
homeschool textbook standards are now talking about being Common Core compliant because they have to be.
We don't, in Indiana, I don't know about the rest of the states, I only speak for the state of Indiana.
Right.
In Indiana, we don't regulate homeschoolers at all.
Right. It's
We couldn't even
homeschool
tell you,
friendly
we
state.
could not tell you who our homeschoolers are.
Right.
We don't mandate standards to them, other than they have to educate their children in 180 days. We don't tell them what kind of curriculum they have to use, none of that. They don't take testing, we have no idea where they go. There may be some publishers that are going to Common Core. We did not mandate that our non-public schools have to have Common Core unless you would be a voucher school. If you're a voucher school, the one thing with vouchers is that you have to take the statewide assessment. So you take the statewide assessment, meaning you're going to take ISTEP or whatever the state has determined. If the state standards are here, you have to at least have some standards that are going to align, or you may find your kids not very successful. And we require that they have to be an A, B, or C school, or they can't have access, continue to have access to eligibility under the voucher
The
system.
only experience I have is a friend who was homeschooled through all of elementary and high school. And the universities loved him because of his test scores. And he got into homeschool because
Homeschool students tend to be very high performing.
They
Tend to be.
and they're not tested,
And that's why,
textbooks aren't
that's why in
standardized.
Indiana we don't, but they have a lot more, they have one thing component that not every child has in this world is a very committed parent.
Right.
And not every homeschooler, I think if you ask educators, they would tell you not every homeschooler is as
Of
great as
course
you
not.
think. But most of them are, I would say, they across the country, they've received recognition of being very high performers,
And
outstanding.
this is a great state to be a homeschooler for sure. It's a homeschool for
That's right.
But they'll still be affected by the ACT and SAT tests.
Correct. And
They'll
those
have
are-
to teach to the Common Core in order to get into
For
college.
college, right, but if Indiana decides not, that's one of the other problems Indiana will have if Indiana drops out of Common Core, unless we create a curriculum that we may not use the name Common Core, but will be Common Core alike, because ACT and SAT have said that they will align themselves to Common Core. In fact,
We could align our state to the same standards, the best standards in other states as well, without yielding control to the federal government, who clearly cannot be trusted with the private information of the students. or-
well, but the flip side is, under Common Core, there's no requirement, there's never been, I've never seen any communication at all that says any data on our students is moving from Indiana to the federal government.
I got a printout right here if you'd like it.
It's right here.
I'd love to see a US document that's printed and proven that the federal government wants to have information on our students.
I'd like to see a document that says the IRS is investigating concerns.
Well, I wish they-
Because there's nothing in writing, but they're doing it anyway.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
may I address that comment? If you look carefully at the stimulus package that started Race to the Top, if you look at the executive summary of Race to the Top, there are outlines, requirements for data collection.
Yes.
Well, part of Race to the Top was, there were different functions in Race to the Top. They were trying to create accountability systems. They didn't necessarily say, I want all of that data in Washington. And they also said, but obviously, I will give you credit, the IRS did not have the authority to do what they did, and I'm not arguing that issue. And there's nothing, Common Core, in and of itself, there's no way, if we adopt a Common Core and don't adopt a PARC or Smarter Balance assessment and continue to do I-STEP, for instance, there's no way that the information's gonna get to the federal government. Because I think the real rub for people ought to be, not necessarily Common Core, but a national assessment. Because a national assessment does give them a more succinct ability to get a hold of that kind of data. It doesn't necessarily, there's not necessarily a data stream mandated in the state. We've not ever mandated that there has to, or should be, a data stream from Indiana to Washington, D.C. And, I've been in many forums recently with other states about this, which is exactly some of the concerns they have. So it's really not as much on Common Core as much as it is the data that's going to be taken from, they think is going to be taken from our kids by the assessments. And then Tony Bennett and I are good friends and have conversations several months ago. One of the things Tony has suggested is, and Indiana could do this in several other states, is that we could keep I-STEP, for instance. It's a relatively expensive test. We could upgrade it, make it similar to PARC or similar to Smart. I don't like Smart Balance, but you can use Smart Balance if you want. And assess basically what they're assessing and create our own consortium of states and not take federal money for it and create our own assessment and then make it available to other states. But we still would be able to use Common Core, but there's no fear then that since it's Indiana's test, that the data is going to go to the federal government.
Right.
Because I think that the true issue is obviously over the assessment, not over Common Core assessments. Yes, sir.
I'm listening to what you're saying, and a lot of what you're saying is jargon. It's not making sense. But I've got this one question. In their own assessment of the quality of the education that's presented in the schools, the Indiana State standards rate a year and a half to 2 years higher than the Common Core. And I gotta ask you.
Fordham rated, and Fordham is an independent rating
Yeah.
group. Fordham has rated standards in Indiana to be at an A level.
Yeah.
I will not argue that. And they also rated our math standards, I think, at one level, language arts a little bit different. But they also did recommend, if you read further and keep on following what Fordham's information stream is, don't just take that one snapshot of time. They've also recommended Indiana adopt Common Core, because they believe our standards are here, but we're not, frankly, I don't think a lot of Hoosiers understand. Indiana has outstanding standards, but this is where our kids perform. Our kids don't perform at our level of standards, they're way below it. And the goal of Common Core is changing the way we're developing, and if you ask many educators, they'll tell you that they're being taught professional development and new ways of educating children that is changing the way those kids are learning and thinking about it. I met with the superintendent just last Thursday.
Again, you're going off on, and I didn't finish my question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And my question was, if it ain't broke, why fix it? We had a standard that was basically superior. We should have been working on bringing our students up there, like teaching phonics, teaching them to use standard math with a column versus a carry, versus trying to adopt a standard. In some instances, what I've seen, have never been used anywhere.
They have not.
And you're calling this progress, and what you're saying here doesn't make sense. Like I say, it sounds like jargon. It sounds like you're trying to talk us into something. And the more you talk, the more opposed to it that I'm coming, because what you're saying, it just does not track. You don't have time to go through some of my own personal endeavors, but our problem has been misinformation to our students, poor quality standards for reading and math programs, which are lower than the standards for what we had when I went to school. And you're calling that progress. You're using reading systems that don't make sense.
Sir, you're also telling me that Indiana's ranked as an A, and telling me today that they had high-quality standards. But let's forget where you were educated. And I mean, we're talking about today. You're telling me that today they have great standards, and that they're not meeting those standards. And so what you're saying is you want us to go back to when you were taught? Is that what you're suggesting?
I don't see what's better about what you're trying to do today.
Well,
I think that's a good question though, Bob, is, does anybody, the state board or anybody else, where did this come off the track? I mean, me and you aren't maybe the smartest hats in the box, but our education was one that got us through, got us good jobs, and as you said, the standards are set first, the curriculum is set next to meet those standards, okay? Somewhere along the lines, the curriculum fell apart and we're not meeting the standards anymore.
What's happened is the rest of the world continued to move, and the United States hasn't. You know, for instance, Indiana, you could have walked out of, in fact, I'd be willing to bet that many people in this room probably graduated from high school and went over and worked at Allison Engine Company or Rolls-Royce or something like that, and had a great middle-class job. But the flip side is, some of those jobs, in fact, you start looking around, if you go to CVS, Walgreens, look at the pharmacists that you have in there. A lot of them aren't Americans. You know why that is? Because they're finding they can't get Americans to fill those positions. And part of it's the education level, and our students are going into it. We have a huge shortage today in engineers in this country. There's not enough people going into engineering, and it's unbelievable.
But that's
I don't think
that's
we're in control over the federal government. That addresses any of
I don't
those
think we're
subjects.
trying, and that's what I'm not advocating the control of the federal government. We're talking about two different things: Common Core versus, federal control. I think the only way the federal government controls it is if you have an assessment that takes what our students are doing and gives any type of information to the federal government. And that's not what we're advocating. We're not talking about moving to PART today. We're not talking about moving to Smarter Balance. We're talking about using iStep or whatever step assessment we move to. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that these were benchmarked. Could you tell me which country they were benchmarked against?
Well, if you start looking at, I can't tell you which country off the top of my yet, I don't.
Because they haven't, and nobody can give us a study of where that has been done.
Well, and
If you can find that out, I'll give you my card, I'd love to have that information.
I'd be happy to get you
Seriously.
some more
Because
information.
we've
I'm
asked
sure.
several people that state this has been benchmarked
And
internationally.
I don't think I said necessarily benchmark, but what I've said is
I
that.
wrote it down.
Well, what I've said is our students are not, no, what I said is our students are not performing as well as the rest of the international community. And I didn't say anything about our, but,
But there's nothing wrong with the state going to these other countries and finding what they're doing well.
well, I
They
agree.
compete directly with them rather than adopting some sort of federal standard, because the federal standards that are laid down for the states often have very disappointing results.
Well, and I don't necessarily, the federal government has no jurisdiction in education, so the federal government involvement is a problem.
It is.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, in 2004, and I'm reading this from the Arizona State University. In 2004, the Qatar wanted to benchmark their math standards with the golden standards that they considered Indiana to be. So,
That's 2004, almost 2014,
Right.
we're a decade from there, so
Right.
things have changed.
But people that were on the validation committee wouldn't even sign off on the standards because they were so bad.
That's not totally true. The number of people did sign off on it.
Some of them did, Sanders.
Well, but ma'am, I
Stotsky,
guarantee you that
and
never
Sanders.
one of our, any time, and so that's the problem, there's so much misinformation out there. When standards are done, not everybody signs off, even in the math standards that everybody's applauding today, not everybody said, hey, they're all great. There were differences of opinion at that point too now.
But these are scholars,
Well,
professors.
I understand
in
that,
those
but there were
fields.
scholars in that didn't necessarily always agree that Indiana was going to do that. Some that wanted to do differently than what they were doing. I know, I've heard Stotsky's mentioned many times as one of the opponents, you know,
She testified here for us, yeah.
she testified in front of the Senate, yes. The sad thing I will say in front of the Senate committee, and this is something, one, if we were gonna do it in the House, we wouldn't let this happen, and I think it was a travesty, is that the people who, the members of the Senate who were opposed to Common Core were very willing to listen to everyone speak in regards to their opposition. They were not willing to let anybody talk, or those people who were opposed actually left the committee and did not attend it when the opponents to that bill were speaking. If you go out there
I was
and
at the hearing and a lot of the opponents spoke before, and then we ran out of time. There was a time limit, and when.
I
the
know
meeting
for a
was over-
fact that there were a number of educators, ma'am, that came there, and they came and almost spoke to an empty room. If there were not, most of the legislators had left. And so, people who were experiencing it personally, who had been involved in it and working with children, who had some direct idea as to how it was working, were not given the opportunity to speak to those people. And I believe that we all, if we're gonna learn, we've gotta be willing to be open-minded and take everybody's opinion. And as lawmakers, policymakers, that's what we have to do, is listen to all sides and decide which side, or maybe track in the middle, rather than say this side's right and that side's wrong. Let's find a road in the middle that makes more sense rather than saying, you know, one or the other. Yes, ma'am, guys?
Yeah. I just want to make a comment to everybody to let them know we do need to get away from the word federal, because this has nothing to do with the federal government. It is privately owned and privately copyrighted.
Yes.
So it is owned by someone. We will never be able to change it. It's not the government,
It's actually owned by Chi, there's a copyright by Chi, which is a.
which is
not-for-profit.
copyrighted.
It's a not-for-profit.
Yes.
Isn't that the Gates
Copyright.
Corporate
It's
Foundation?
No, it's
Yes.
National
Yes.
Government
And the
Association, is a
chiefs.
Chi.
And I do have one question for you though. All the information that you've gotten and collected on Common Core, the things that you've been told, who was it and where did you get your information for when you made your decision on the core?
I still haven't told, I mean, I voted for Common Core, as did Dennis Cruz, and, at the round table. I haven't said that I'm opposed to it because, at this point in time, I think it's worth studying. I did not say that I would not, study it. I have not made my opinion. I've not said today, at this point in time, I want Common Core. I think that what we need to do is, continue to look at it. And that's the purpose of this study this summer, is to take opportunities for us to hear from all sides. And there's going to be opponents and proponents speak, and we'll have to make decisions based on that.
You
And
sat
actually,
here
the state
and
board
told,
will.
you sat here and told all of us that the people who were opposing it had our opinions, and then once we heard the facts, well, that we would basically be able to change our minds?
No, I said one person, Andrea Neal, that wasn't me.
Yes.
That was one of the staffers for the governor, hoping that and the position was if Common Core is as good as some of the opponents think it is, then he thought she would be open-minded enough to accept if that was the case.
That was for Andrea.
So in
Correct.
other words, there's
You-
only one person on the board that would possibly be in favor of Common Core.
Well, I know of for a fact. I mean, he reappointed a number of them who are, obviously, they've already voted for it.
Right.
So I can't tell you what the new members are.
I guess we're all kind of hoping that all of our representatives and senators, when they hear the facts and understand things better,
Are open.
would move to one side or the other based on what's best for the citizens of Indiana.
And I think that's
and
true.
the future of our students.
And maybe we should all let the parents know what they're doing to our children and letting everybody in the state know and not just people in Indianapolis for that one study is what I was kind of hoping for. So everybody knows what the new standards are for their child.
Is there a comprehensive statement of the curriculum anywhere?
No, because not all the Common Core curriculum has been developed yet. You gotta remember, you have the standards haven't, so you're laughing those. Common Core isn't totally been
You gotta vote for it, find out what's in it.
The problem
The
is.
standards are, but you can't, curriculum is being developed as the Common Core is being,
Now, I gotta cut you off here, because you're sitting here talking about how great this could be. But you're promoting a standard that hasn't been set yet, and you're putting it over some successful things that have happened in the past. That's
Common Core,
ridiculous.
no, Common Core is out. We have the standards, but we don't have all the curriculum until it's totally implemented. It's not totally implemented yet.
Oh, yeah.
We have curriculum up through grade 2, and we'll continue to have that as it moves forward, but we don't have all the English and math. Right, because our at this point in time, I'm not aware of history. I know they have a science component, but frankly, the consortium only anticipates having math and language arts. We only test, Indiana only tests on math and language arts on a regular basis. We'll test in social studies periodically throughout the child's career, but not every year. But we test language and math and language arts through doing. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm backtracking quite a bit ago. You noted Fordham Institute that is supposedly conservative in support
I didn't
of.
say I was conservative, I just said they're an institute that assesses
Okay,
standards.
you're cutting me off, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
You noted that Fordham Institute support, as though it was to convince us that if Fordham says that it's good. Fordham Institute, I know for a fact, is funded in part by Bill Gates, who has poured in over $100 million to force Common Core on us. This is a goal of his.
But the only reason I bring Fordham up is because Fordham is the one that's given Indiana the grade of an A. So you can't very well say, hey, we're an A state, and not look at Fordham and say, hey, because they're the ones that did it. And I don't know whether they did it before or after they got money from
But
the
that's
university.
why it appears to me very much you're talking in a circle, because the same people are funding it and behind this.
I think that, I don't know how Fordham's opinions have divested since they've received money from Gates. Obviously, Gates is we're all using computers, so we're all using Microsoft in many days. And
I can tell you that it has not changed in the state of Wisconsin on May 22nd. A representative of Fordham Institute testified very much in favor of Common Core.
I know that they're in favor of Common Core. I said that. I don't think they've changed on Common Core. But I don't know how Gates has changed Fordham from when they gave Indiana an A on our standards to if they've changed at all. I don't know if they've changed researchers or not. I couldn't tell you
Bill
that.
Gates is up to influence people.
Well, but I don't know, but we all, none of us know, unless you really search it and better research, if those researchers that gave Indiana an A 4 years ago on our math standards or whatever, if they are different researchers than told us to go forward with Common Core. I don't know, I can't tell you that, I don't know, can you tell me that, if the researchers that'd be different today?
That I don't know.
Well, see, that's-
But they're all, if you'll pardon the expression, they're all in bed together to get us to go for this.
But ma'am, you know, you're assuming that, okay, I work for a company and that, or you work for Fordham, and then Fordham comes in and says, okay, to all the researchers, you know, they have several researchers, I assume, that they just say, we just got a grant from Fordham, from Gates, and now we're going to go ahead, I want all of you to change everything you've done, and I want you now to endorse. I don't know that that happens that often. Now, maybe it did at Fordham, I couldn't tell you.
I've got a thing here from, excuse me, I'm sitting back here trying to keep my mouth shut. I've got a thing here from the Goldwater Institute, and it talks about why the Common Core is so bad. And right down here, Common Core standards are insufficient, which is why we've heard the term that we're dumbing down Indiana, which is a common term we're hearing, because we're going to lower our standards so we meet the standards of the country instead of trying to get our kids up. But right here it says the common, and this was dated May of 12, last year, 1 year ago. And this is from the Goldwater Institute. And it says the Common Core math standards fail to meet the content targets recommended by the National Mathematics Advisory Panel, the standards of leading states and our international competitors. So we're already 15, 16, and I saw that the other day in the paper, where Indiana is far behind some of these other countries that are ahead of us, but we're already going to lower our standards, even from where they are.
Well, I know that the one thing
So
is-
it's better to have, say, everybody's getting A's, so, because we're going to lower the standards?
No, I totally agree with you.
I think that is totally ridiculous.
I would agree with you. If that's exactly what happens, I totally would agree with you, that's not the right direction to go.
So is it all about, is it about the government money that it
I don't think it's all about government. I frankly could care less whether we get Title I money. I mean, as a legislator, I'm more concerned, and anybody who knows much about me historically would know that I'm much more concerned about what's best for kids. It's not about money at all. I mean, Title I money, we get a lot of Title I money, but I personally would prefer that the federal government not be involved, that Indiana spend our money the way we think is best, and you know, our school funding formula, in my mind, is a better way to drive results as opposed to have the federal government drop their money in periodically around the state. But there's a lot of school. I guarantee you, there's not a school corporation in the state that would say they wouldn't take a federal grant dollar. I mean, even if we didn't do Common Core, there'd be a lot of schools that would dance to get the money.
Representative Behning.
But I don't know that, I mean, Indiana has its standards, and we'll set our standards where we think they should be. And, but I'm not driven at all. And when Tony Bennett did it, Tony Bennett didn't do it with money. I mean, Tony Bennett was looking at what's best for kids. I know Tony well enough to know that it wasn't.
How can they approve something that hadn't been written? There was nothing for them to go on when they signed up for it.
We had the standards, we didn't have the curriculum. That's the difference. And you know, when they were first endorsed, I don't know if they were all available, but you know, the concepts were available, and if they were developed the way the concepts were advocated, I assume that, you know, Tony did a very good job of trying to do what's best for kids. I don't know anybody that knows Tony Bennett would not argue that that's central focus. Did you have something?
Yeah, I have two questions. One of them is, it sounds like, at least in front of this group, you're saying that you still could be persuaded to say maybe this isn't the direction we should be going. If so, what information would you need to be able to say, okay, you know, I'm persuaded now that Indiana needs to go a different direction than Common Core? That's question one, regarding you personally. And why is Speaker of the House Bosma so adamant in support of Common Core? If you can, if you're aware of that answer.
I tell you, first off, you gotta remember that I would say Common Core, first off, is endorsed by our universities. All of our state universities want Common Core. I have not spent much time talking to private universities because they don't come and lobby so much, but all of our state universities believe Common Core is the right way to move. Unanimously.
Is there government money going to them because it's new?
I don't know if they, I don't know what, they don't, I'm sure they get federal money, because there's a lot of federal money in federal, in higher education, but, so they're in favor of it. Industry's overwhelming in favor of it. I mean, our big employers, Cummins, for instance, has made the statement to myself and to many others, that they want to build more plants in Indiana. They need more skilled labor. They don't have the labor force in Indiana. They can't find employees that will meet their needs. And they want Indiana to develop standards that help get their employees college and career ready. Now, that doesn't mean they have to go to college, but they may have to, spend some time. And so he hears from people like Lily, he hears from people like Cummins. It's a good word, right? From the people all the time in the universities, and they're all saying, we need Common Core. And, so that's where the speaker.
Do they even know what they're asking for? I mean, if this hasn't
Have they
been
checked it?
out, and we're just
Ma'am,
getting.
I don't know, he asked the
I
question.
know, and I'm not
I can't
meaning
tell you what they're
to jump
saying.
all over you, but do these people even know? Has this been another one of those things under the
It's just
carpet that
cash.
nobody knows about, that suddenly everybody's saying, hey, this is great, but nobody really knows anything about it?
And, it could be too, ma'am, that people, one thing we do know is that we're not performing at the level we need to be. I don't care what anybody says. If you would say, and Hendricks County schools tend to perform better than the rest of the state, but if you add all of our state schools together, and Indiana does do better on some levels. I mean, up to fourth grade, our kids usually are doing great compared to a lot of other countries in other states. But it's like from fourth grade, they start having this trend line that starts going down, especially in middle school, and they never peak up again. And so, the problem is we're just not meeting the goals that have been set. So it's kind of like, maybe their idea is something different would be better than doing the same old thing and getting the same old results without changing anything else. And that may be what their thoughts are.
Did you get to finish the rest of it? You mentioned universities and big companies. Was there any other aspect?
I know those two people spoke to him. I can't tell you what the speaker was in that line. I just know that those two groups and a number of them. It's not like I mentioned Cummins and Lilly. I mean, there's a lot of employers that. Chamber of Commerce. I mean, there's a lot of groups, that Manufacturers Association. Most of frankly, I would have to say that it's almost, and the Tea Party deserves a lot of credit for derailing Common Core in this state, because it really was based on a decision because of the advocates of the Tea Party, and probably not at all the other side, which is everyone else. I mean, I would almost say the whole world is probably, there's not that many people out there that are aligning with the Tea Party in opposition to Common Core that I'm aware of. Now, maybe you can share other advocates that you are aware of that are aligning.
But when you were answering the question, were you answering that for yourself or for
well, when I know of what Ryan knows. I mean,
okay.
That's what he's
But what
talking
about, I guess there's two parts to the question, and you were, I guess, answering the second part first. But
in terms of who it would take, well, I'm frankly, I'm going to be open as we have these hearings this next couple of. I would love to have, rather than have all the anecdotal information that's spread around. There's a lot of anecdotal information. People get off the internet, and I don't believe I read everything I get off the internet to be accurate necessarily. If we could, I would love to have, and have no problem this summer. I'm sure we'll have a number of authorities in both. Who are advocates and opponents to the Common Core, and I'm willing to listen and see, why they think it will work, why they think it won't work, and make a decision based on. The basic thing what I'm focused on is what's best for kids and getting college and career ready standards. It doesn't have to be called the Common Core. I really could care less. I mean, if you look at what I assume, are you guys happy with what's going on in Texas?
No.
Okay. You are, and he's not.
Well, because you understand that I'm answering from the standpoint of C-scope.
right.
But she might be answering from the standpoint of they don't have Common Core.
They don't have Common Core, but they have Common Core lights.
Right.
And same way in Virginia. Virginia doesn't have Common Core, but Virginia's got Common Core light standards. So, that's all I care about is doing what's best for kids. So, and I don't believe in reporting information to the federal government or giving federal power, federal authority is in the best interest of anyone. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that currently schools are not performing to the existing standards. It's 67% of the standards that they're conforming to. What has convinced you that switching over to a Common Core will bring that performance up, other than
Well,
lowering the standards?
probably one of the most convincing things I've heard from educators. I was at a conference, I was at Indiana University last week on a panel, and actually went on Common Core, we were talking about a number of issues. Superintendent of Morgantown, Mrs. Dan Doe, came up to, asking a couple of questions, and she was talking about the difference she has seen in her for kindergarten students. She was actually very upset about what Indiana did with pausing Common Core. She said, it's moving the wrong direction. I've seen what Common Core can do for kids. She said, I have living proof with my kindergartners who have now been in, had an opportunity to have Common Core. Their teachers have gotten professional development with it. And she says that they're moving unbelievably farther than the students have in the past.
But we always perform better with the smaller kids.
Yeah, but she's saying they're moving farther than they have in the past. So they're moving at a higher level, and she saw significant, and I hear that from a lot of educators. I mean, a lot of educators that are in favor of the Common Core. So, I mean, I look at them, and I assume you're an educator who's not in favor.
No, I'm a parent. He started in kindergarten with the core. First grade, we just finished first grade with the core. Most of the time, I could not help him with his first grade math homework. His teacher hated the core. Every teacher I talk to hates it. I am not allowed to bring up their names anytime I talk to anybody at the State House because they will be fired. They're afraid to be fired. And it's not just our school. I've gone around and talked to people, the Greenwood teacher, kindergarten teachers. I just saw one on Saturday. Found out she was a teacher. She hates it. Don't mention my name. I'll be fired.
I'll tell you what I also did. I'm a big advocate of vouchers, and I'm chairman of my home church, and my church is Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We are the largest denomination outside of Catholics in terms of education system. We have the largest education system. We have a big school. We have about 300 kids in our school. I went to our principal, asked him the same question. I said, tell me where you are coming from. What do you think about Common Core? And, do you like it or do you not like it? Because I figured those are the people who have direct experience on, how it's implemented and whether it's doing something. And his comments were, he said, I really like it, especially in the as you get into upper grades. He said, I think it's what's right for kids. He said, I'm not as sure about it into the elementary level at this point in time, but so that's where one of the places I think I get most of mine. I feel highest level of comfort in terms of changing my opinion based on people who are in the classroom on a daily basis and see success and see things change.
But if it's not in the higher grades, how would they know? And if it's not written yet, how do they know?
They do know because schools were told to implement. Some schools are further along in terms of implementation. There's an implementation guidelines that say they have to be at this point, at this specific point in time. Some schools are already done. Some schools have done kindergarten through 12th grade already.
Yeah, but we're saying one fits all, and that was the idea of the teacher's position was, this student here learns this way, this student over here learns better by using a different technique. And with Common Core, as I understand it, it's a cookie cutter kind of thing, one fits all, and the teacher can't deviate from it.
I can't tell you, I've not talked to educators who told me
Now,
that, so I don't know.
I have some relatives that are educators, and they're not principals, they're in the classroom, and they said it's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are educators, they're not teachers or babysitters, they're educators.
There's left brain dominant children and there's right brain dominant children. You're looking at a right brain who had a terrible time. And it's all geared for one left brain dominant. And if you cookie cut us, those students out there that are left brain or right brain dominant.
I'm meeting with
are
the
gonna have a really rough
Dyslexia
time.
Society in the next couple of days. My LA asked me that today. Apparently there is a huge number of kids that are dyslexic, a lot more that we actually realize, but we're not doing anything about it. We're telling them you're going to have to learn the traditional way today. And from what they've shared with several people that I've talked to is, we're talking about 30–40% of the population has some level of dyslexia.
Which is right brain probably. Right brain dominant people are dyslexic.
But so far standards haven't, so far educators have not recognized it and taught to help those kids. So, it's not working for everybody today either, you know,
Does
so.
Common Core address those issues?
I don't know, I can't tell you that for sure.
No, it does not.
I don't know that you can say that for sure, though. People who say no, I mean, you know for a fact that it doesn't deal with those.
Yeah, because there is no, if there is any kind of specialized training either any child needs, they have to go to the special class.
Well, but that doesn't mean that an educator could not have special skills in, I mean, I believe personally that what would be best for all kids is for all kids to have IEPs, individual education plans, so that we create education plans for every child that best meets the needs of that child. And which may not mean that every day they're in the same classroom, but they may spend some time in a different classroom.
No, they would be sent to the special needs class.
Well, but you know, who knows?
They tried that.
Yes,
And please forgive my few disjointed comments. First of all, you confirmed in your comments to me what expert Jane Robbins of the American Principals Project said, that Common Core is truly a school-to-work program. It's going to be tracked. It was no accident that President Obama himself referred and touted the German education system where they do it. Secondly, the concerns about the curriculum. One of the informational readings at the high school level is an executive order increasing the power of the EPA. I've been teaching for 40 years. My college roommate is still in the classroom. She's taught 4th grade for 40 years. She called me. She's in a Catholic school. They've implemented Common Core. She called me the other day, and she is in tears over Common Core. For years, she has had the privilege of getting her students to love reading. And she says, with Common Core, I can't do it. That's a problem to me.
30 to 50% of the English literature classes will be informational texts, which will include liberal indoctrination to whatever Obama and the next Democrat leader wants the kids to
let's
read.
hope we don't have a Democrat
Well, we
president.
hope we
Well,
don't.
no, it's the textbooks. It's not the administration. It's the people who write the textbooks.
Well, I understand, but there's difference between textbooks and standards. You gotta remember that. You got standards and you've got curriculum. Curriculum is textbooks, it is not standards.
Well, it's 8:30, and
We're never gonna get anybody.
an hour and 15 minutes. I think we've had
I do want to make one point, and I do thank you, Bob, for coming into the hostile environment. But, to your point, I thank you for that. I thank you that you're still open-minded on Common Core. I really get frustrated with our state education people because we've not figured out what happened. Our education in this state has gone to crap. And I'm not sure what happened and how it happened. Comparing to the world, whether you're doing China or Japan, where they got 4 schools, they take them at birth and they start them in school and do that, you can't compare to those kind of things. One of the things, this is a free country. You need to go against free countries on that part. But folks, this state does have an education problem. I manage a store. I've gone through 50 people. Half of them supposed to be educated with college or with high school education and can't read, can't add. They can't do it, no, they can't count change. There is a problem, okay? It's a very complicated one, I understand that. And I'm not sure I want to be in your shoes, but as you said, there's a lot of misinformation, and Obama and the Department of Education at the federal level is not helping in this state. So that's my 2 cents. I'll quit.
Yeah, I did a search. I'm curious. I was educated in the middle 60s, okay? And I was tested at a second-year college education out of high school, okay? I got an excellent education. So I wondered what in the Samuel happened between the mid-60s and where we are today. And I found out in 1965 and 1966, two teachers' unions came together and formed the NEA, okay? I'm just saying, it's been going downhill, baby, ever since, and that's part of
Well,
it.
there's a lot, I think there's a lot of things you can start looking at history and see things have changed. I mean, Dick Thompson, back here, been an educator, I don't know how many years ago. I'm sure you've seen a lot change in your lifetime in the classroom today, but obviously Dick can attest to this. I'm no friend of the teachers union at all, and I understand what you're saying, but there's a lot of things, you know, courts have been involved in education. We're mandated to mainstream everybody. I mean, schools aren't mandated to mainstream, but so many kids that probably would have been segregated when you were in school, you know, are today mainstream in classrooms. I mean, you may have a kid, was talking to an educator who had a kid who had Tourette's and would say profanities about every 30 seconds, and that the parents had fought to have the child mainstream. This child was in a first kindergarten class, I think it was, and it would, you know, every 30 seconds, and I'm thinking, well, what are you doing for the rest of the kids? You
There
know,
was
you're
no
not-
special education in my school. We were educated, both of us, in the state of Virginia.
So, but you
But
start
there was
looking at all
no-
those different
no-
factors and all those different
No
things
special
together.
ed.
I don't think anybody can say, this is what changed and where it happened.
Well, it was a number of things probably came together. I'm just saying, in the mid-60s, we were still getting a good education.
I think one aspect, personally, as a parent that I've seen, is the increasing size of the schools. When you get to these mega high schools, and you kind of mentioned that you've seen the statistics show that the older the kids get, the worse the performance gets. And I think that's, to me, it's partly because of the size of the schools is getting larger, and the kids aren't getting the educational.
They don't get the personal
Exactly right.
attention. Although, you know, and I will hate to say this, but Gates actually is funded trying to go into creating, and I don't think that research has totally been as successful as they hoped, where they actually have gone into some schools and created academies inside of schools, because there's no question, especially in terms of safety, and some of the kids doing some of the things that, you know, happen, you know, like in Colorado or, you know, all over the country, that are, when you're a teacher and those kids are just being, you know, moved through your classroom, you don't develop that personal relationship with them. So the goal was to create smaller academies, and I don't know that it'd help improve academic performance at this point in time, but it definitely helps in terms of school safety issues.
Sure. Well, you.
I can talk all about what's going on.
Yeah, how do we provide information to you that's from our perspective that would allow?
I do have cards. I'd be happy to leave cards. You can contact my, I have a great LA who does a great job of following up and getting information. And then, you know, we will, when we decide to have hearings, and I'm sure the media will make things available. They don't do things. If you want, I'd be happy to have Josh let you guys know when they're scheduled ahead of time. You're welcome to attend wherever they'll be at the State House.
As you noticed, I presented a freedom calendar to Secretary of State Boston, so we had one also. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Sorry I was late.
A couple of, for those of you that got the nice agenda, next meeting is July the 22nd. We haven't actually decided on what's going to happen that night. So
Trust me.
I would. After the last meeting, we talked about the Christmas party, and